Good afternoon. I'm here with Martin Nussbaum and David Schwartz. They're the founders of Slate Property Group, one of the most active developers and real estate investors in the New York area. Martin, David, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You have been very, very active in the market. Just take us back a little bit to how you got started in the business. So
how far back are we going?
All the way back. We're going all the way back.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn back in 1977, so if we want to start from there.
Sure.
I started my career in investment banking at JP Morgan and realized
I heard you hated it.
I was the world's worst investment banker, probably, I think voted, and I absolutely hated it.
And how did you find real estate? So I know your dad was an urban planner and transportation.
Yeah, so my dad was an engineer at the city. He was a chief engineer, and he was commissioner of traffic and first deputy commissioner of transportation. And
in Brooklyn?
New York City.
Okay.
And is better known as Gridlock Sam.
Yeah.
So that was like my first kind of taste of it.
So you grew up with like public, private, sort of all that stuff part of your life. Was it a dinner table conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it centered around traffic, but real estate, had its ways in there. And I ended up just loving it as a little kid. I always wanted to know how much a house cost and why this house cost more than that. So I was fortunate enough to get my first job at Crescent Heights, and I was doing development and construction around the country, of which I knew nothing about. Okay. Which was a great way to learn.
So it was just trial by fire, getting in there, figuring out how to. Did you do renovations and ground up and everything?
Mostly ground up. We did a little bit of renovation, but we were doing big projects in San Francisco, LA, Honolulu. It was a great learning experience. And then from there, I started my own company. I found somebody to back me. Okay. And I was looking to buy stuff, and I started buying in Brooklyn. Okay. I think mostly because I didn't have any money to buy in Manhattan, but at this point
now that doesn't apply anymore. Right?
At this point, I'll take credit for being so ahead of the game. But really, I knew Brooklyn very well, so I kind of knew the streets, and it was 2004, so it was just starting to be a real place to go. And back then, to get somebody to come to Williamsburg, I had to promise them lunch at Peter Luger's.
Okay, and security maybe, right?
Yeah, maybe a place to park, and now it's like. Forget about it. Everybody wants to be in Brooklyn. But, at that point, it's not that long ago, right? 13 years ago, Brooklyn was like, it was like telling somebody you're going to invest in, Suffolk County.
So I actually started off investment banking as well. Okay. I backed into it, was pre-med in college, and somehow landed up in real estate investment banking post-college. Just the first job I could get was an investment banking job at real estate, and I was like, I'll try this for a year. Okay. And similar to Dave, loved the concept of real estate, but didn't really enjoy the banking side of it. It was a little bit too detailed for me. So after about 2 years, I went to work for a large family office in New Jersey who owned a big portfolio of real estate in New Jersey and New York, and really learned the management, repositioning, and a little bit of ground-up development through that avenue. Then founded Silverstone with two other partners, and that was the first time I sort of went out on my own. And actually, Dave and I met way back when, the first time in probably 2007 and 8.
Before that, I was still at Crescent Heights when we met.
Oh, that's right.
So it's probably like 2002, 2003. It's probably when we first met.
And then we tried to reconnect in 2007, 2008 on some deals in Brooklyn through the family office that I was working with and him. And that's when we really sort of rekindled sort of like our business relationship and started really looking at opportunities together.
Unfortunately enough, we didn't buy anything in Brooklyn in 2007 and 8.
Yeah, that would have been a tough time. But then you guys at Silverstone, you had a really good time buying up distressed assets, right? Things had had tanked, and you guys came in with the capital and made really hefty profits on the assets that you bought. Talk a little bit about that. How did you approach that business? Was that something you guys had been gearing up to do? Had you noticed the writing on the wall and said, hey, we're going to be able to strike soon?
Well, I think when we started Silverstone, happened to be a great time because it was sort of towards the end of 2009. So that was as the market sort of bottomed out, and looking back, it was as the market bottomed out and was sort of on the rise. So if anything we bought for the first year looked pretty good 2 years later, just because the market was going like this, and we just got lucky in that sense. But I also think that we put in the right systems and the right mechanisms in place to sort of really control the operations, control the costs. And we got fairly aggressive in our space of buying sort of multifamily mixed-use assets, as well as some smaller development sites in Brooklyn, and sort of got on the right wave sort of in terms of where the market was going.
Were you purchasing notes on properties as well and kind of getting into that distress
we
space?
did a little bit. I would say that was probably less than 10% of our business. The bulk of it was just buying real estate. It was buying existing buildings in Manhattan and development sites in Brooklyn.
Installed sites. I think one of the things that we took from that is that people overreact. So there's an overreaction. We said, look, New York is still New York. Yeah. People have overreacted. Values don't shouldn't drop that dramatically, and it's a buying opportunity. So we were buying buildings for $300 a foot,
right?
Wow.
And in Murray Hill, Kips Bay. That's, again, there wasn't really a market for it, but we said, look at those numbers. I mean,
so at the time when you said people overreacted, so did banks, right? Funding had dried up. So how did you guys have that capital to move?
I think a lot of it has to do with the trust with your lenders and your investors, right? So now you can look at it that lenders might be much more cautious, but if they're going with an operator that has a sound business plan and they trust them, they're still doing business. So, I think it's the same thing then. It's sort of like, what's the business? A lot of people were just saying, oh, we're buying it for $300, it used to be worth $500. What do the cash flows look like? How are you going to pay the debt service? How are you going to operate these assets? So it really comes down to that more than just, there's a lot of people that have a harebrained scheme, but do you have a real business? Do you have real infrastructure? Can you run it? And we're seeing it right now where, a lot of lenders have given a lot of money to rentals and condos and everything, and are looking at and saying, should we keep doing this? But they're looking at our deals and they're saying, okay, these deals make sense. It pencils out. I understand why this is a great angle. Even if we discount your rents, even if we discount this, even if we discount that, we know you guys are going to finish it. We know you'll be able to lease it up. So we're still being able to, to operate in our business.
So, since 2013, we've done about $1.5 billion worth of acquisitions and development sites. And I think just going back to your question before, I think the other thing is we've always been very low leveraged in our portfolio. So banks like seeing a lot of equity in transactions. So when we first started, we were always putting in a significant amount of equity in deals. And still today, generally speaking, our portfolio is maybe 60% levered. And that hurt us because, arguably if it would have been 80, 90% leveraged, we probably would have made a lot more money.
Yeah, sure.
But, I think
what's the standard in sort of the assets that you guys are looking at mostly?
I mean, it can be anywhere from, 50 to 60 up to 85. People that put in a lot of mezzanine.
Yeah, I'd say generally somewhere between 70 to 75 is the norm.
Okay.
For most of the assets that we're sort of involved in.
Right.
So we typically like to be very equity heavy in the beginning of a transaction. Once we stabilize it, once we've built it, once we've repositioned it, we'll do more sort of standard, leverage levels.
You guys are also very active as developers. I think that's what sets you apart, is that you guys have made a good amount of money on sort of buying, holding for a little while, renovating, and then selling for a hefty profit. But you're also doing a lot of ground up, especially in Brooklyn, right?
Yep.
Talk a little bit about how that became such a big part of your business.
Well, I've always been a developer, and I would actually classify us more as builders than just developers.
Okay.
Right? So we are really, really construction focused. When you look at a deal, all the risk is in the construction. What the rents are. But I think what we realized is that there's such a need for housing in New York City. I mean, we have so many people that continue to move here.
Right.
There's such a need for it, and a lot of people were doing the $3,000 and $4,000 a foot condos, and that was really not our business. So even if you look at the renovation stuff that we did or the ground up stuff that we do, it's somewhat of a similar clientele in terms of people that are paying great rents, paying nice apartments. These are not the hedge fund billionaires or the oligarchs coming from Russia or wherever.
We're very much more heavily focused on residential rentals and more quote unquote affordable condos in Brooklyn, where the price points are $1,200 to $1,400 a foot.
Okay.
And if you look at the rentals, the rent per person, is sort of the way we look at it a lot.
Rent per person? I haven't heard that metric.
Yeah, so a lot of people have roommates. I had roommates when I graduated college. I don't know if you did, but we moved from college situation where you had roommates to New York with roommates. And it's the rent per person. We really look at that, and can people spend $1,500 a month, $1,600 a month, $1,800 a month? Where else do you find that, right? It's it's not the $6,000 a month one bedrooms that are being built in Manhattan right now. So we're looking at that. Studios in a lot of parts in Brooklyn, low 2000s to mid 2000s for a studio, one bedrooms in the high 2000s to the low 3000s, two bedrooms in the high 3s to low 4s. We think that's a good sweet spot for people that have good jobs and make a good living, but at the same time are not rich.
You guys have been both pretty vocal on 421A, which has just come back to life.
What is that? I think you mean affordable New York.
Affordable New York, my bad. That is in fact the new term, but that was out of commission for a year and change, and developers had predicted that it would be, it would sort of slow down the market, which it did. What they had also said, and what I believe you guys have also said, is that if it hadn't come back, you would not see new rental stock added to the city. How would that, developers have to develop. So what would they make? Like, what would the alternate options be? And I guess the follow-up is, now with it back, when do you see the changes actually trickling in? Is the market going to come back to where it was in 2015?
I mean, I think the adjustment in pricing is how developers will make money. To the extent that there was no 421A, there would have to be a massive adjustment in pricing.
By adjustment, you mean
downward adjustment of land value in order to offset the lack of program that would.
But we didn't quite see that. We just saw trading sort of frozen,
stop, right? Because I didn't think it got to the point where it broke through the need for people to trade or the adjustment to actually occur.
There would also be, condos, right? There's retail, there's office, industrial. So I think that, it would take a long time, but there are things, developers developed for years when there weren't opportunities to build market rate in New York. So we just have a lot fewer units, I think. I think you just have a lot fewer units, but I think developers would do things. People would buy existing buildings and renovate. There'd be more of that. And
was there some sort of group meeting between all the prominent developers and saying, hey, like, this is what we all believe? Because the narrative that I got from every developer is like, rental housing is not feasible. And that was across the board. That was remarkably consistent.
Maybe we weren't invited to the meeting, I don't know. But look, developers understand how it makes sense. If taxes are 30% of your gross income, it just doesn't work. Land prices would have to go down 75%.
Okay.
Like, that's just not going to happen.
And sellers don't really.
If you own a property that's $20 million, are you going to then tomorrow say, okay, I'll take 5?
Sure.
Right. What are you going to do? You take 19 or 18.
Right.
But it's also the thing that I think people missed a lot is we don't buy land. We buy buildings and knock them down.
Sure.
So all this industrial stuff, industrial properties are worth a fortune right now. Industrial stuff is trading $400 to $500 a foot in Queens and Brooklyn because all of the all that Williamsburg and Long Island City stuff was knocked down. So if you want to deliver products to Manhattan or to northern Brooklyn and Queens, you have to be somewhere. So the industrial properties are worth a lot. Yeah. So it's not like it's worth zero. It's just sometimes the highest and best use wouldn't be development.
I think that for what we're looking at to do now is more sort of owning real estate more long term. So what we're doing is we're financing deals short term to sort of get through the development phase, and then putting longer term financing and looking to really hold assets much longer.
Let's talk a little bit about rent stabilization, rent control. So I believe you had spoken a lot about income averaging as being something, a potential solution. You want to just briefly talk about what that could look like and why?
So you're talking for low income housing. Yeah. So for those who don't understand, the low income housing tax credit is if you make 60% of the area median income. Right. So if you rent to those, then you can qualify for low income housing tax credits. But what income averaging would do is say if the average of the building is 60, so you could do some at 40%, some at 30%, some at 100%. So what it would do is, instead of delivering all the units at one price point and one kind of income point,
it's catering to sort of a lower strata as well as
different areas. So some markets, I think in New York we have a huge homeless crisis, right? So we have to hit a lot of these very low income people. At the same time, I think a lot of middle class has been priced out of New York. There were affordable, non-subsidized areas in New York even 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, if you wanted to move to Crown Heights, you could probably find, or Bushwick, you could probably find an affordable apartment. Yeah. Try doing that today.
It's tough.
It's not going to happen. And, we're seeing that throughout. Look at places like Astoria. Look at, a lot of areas throughout Brooklyn and Queens, even up in Harlem. At Harlem 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could probably find an affordable place to live. And now it's very hard. So I think we have to create housing for our firemen, teachers, bus drivers, everybody, as well as the very low income. So income averaging would just give us more tools to do that.
A lot of developers have been rushing into the South Bronx, seeing it as sort of the next frontier, cheap land, access to transit. You guys have stayed away. What's that about?
I don't think, the South Bronx is the next market, not for sort of market rate stuff. I think when you sort of look at it, it's kind of far away from all the other hot areas. What's cool about Brooklyn is that when you look across the river, what's Williamsburg across from the East Village, right? You take the subway one stop, and you're in the East Village.
But you're only about 30 minutes from the city if you take the train.
From the city, but from the Upper East Side, where you have people like Martin living. That's not where Martin and his kids, right? That's not as much of.
I guess also we're very focused on what we're doing, and I think we have a very strict niche of what we're looking to buy, what we're good at, what markets we know. And I think, quite frankly, we're very busy with what we're doing, and we have not had a hard time finding new opportunities in the locations that we are investing in. And so, again, we don't know that much about South Bronx because we don't spend day to day there every day like a lot of other people do. And I'm sure it's wonderful for a lot of people. But where we do spend time, where we do think we have a real insight and a competitive advantage, are the markets that we play in.
But when you have people like, Chatreed and Somerset going out there looking for a $500 million construction loan, I think 1,700 odd units, does that not make you think, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here that we're not looking at?
Not really. I mean, I think we're focused in Brooklyn, and we also think there's, some really good markets in Queens. Like Astoria is a market that we love. Really close. It's already a great neighborhood. You have sort of that Greek-Italian kind of feel to it. So you have the bakeries and the restaurants and everything. 2 stops from Midtown, on the train. And a lot of people that we, tenants of ours and people that we've met that have moved from Brooklyn up to Astoria. It's got more of the neighborhood feel than Long Island City. Yeah. So I think that it's kind of got it.
And what are the signs that you guys look at when you're targeting a new neighborhood, or besides knowing it or having, maybe
it's very simple. You got to find a coffee shop. A new coffee shop opens up, you know that there's something that's happening.
Look at the newspapers they sell at the newsstands, right? All of that sort of stuff. But talk to people. We like to talk to people and understand where people are moving, why they move. I mean, real estate is so much about knowing these markets and understanding why people are doing things and
going to them. I mean, we spend a lot of time in the markets that we go to at night, on the weekends, and not just going up there to look at the buildings when you're in construction, because then you get to really see who's going where are the stores opening, who's going to eat. You get to really feel the neighborhood, and as you feel the neighborhood, you can really start to move with it.
Now, one of the big concerns in the market, both on the rental and condo side, is are we in a situation where there's a glut of condos? Are we in a situation where there's a glut of rentals? What are your thoughts on that? I'm guessing you have to be by nature optimistic because you're building a lot of this product. But what's your sort of long-term take on what's going on with supply?
New York's supply's not the problem in New York. It's a type of supply, right? I think a lot of people did the same type of things, and I think it's the capital that you have. So if you can wait it out a little bit, there are going to be good times in the market and bad times in the market, right? But if you thought you were going to, if you underwrote correctly, you shouldn't have a problem. We've underwritten our deals, and we're renting up at or close to projection. So, I don't think it's a problem. But even if rents go down 5 or 10%, we're not in any trouble. We've underwritten our deals so that we have quite a bit of cushion. Because, like you said earlier, 10 years from now, it's kind of easy to see what's a good deal. So I think, it's about we're a little bit more conservative. We never did the super high-end condos. We haven't gotten into some things that might be a little bit riskier. And we were pretty conservative on our underwriting. So I think we really, we're very well situated for waiting it out if there is a problem. But, really, I think we're going to see this summer, where rental rates really are. I think over the winter it's really hard to tell.
Both of you obviously are in this for the long haul. But how do you resist that sort of allure of building the project that everyone's going to talk about, the next 157, the next 432 Park?
So I don't think that's what drives either of us. I mean, I could say for myself, I would far prefer to be the guy that builds the next LeFrak City than the 157 or one of those buildings. But I don't think it's about building the biggest or tallest or flashiest building. We love the business. We want to make deals that work. We want to own it long term. We're really focused on the real estate, and it's not about building the trophy building. I don't think is part of our business plan.
You guys talk about we, but obviously we is not just Slate. You guys are often teaming up with partners all the way from Adam America to Vanka. How do you go about choosing your partners?
So I think what we do is we're very careful up front in sort of identifying who we're doing business with. And I think the most important thing is identifying roles. I think if you have very clear roles up front, that's very clear as to who's doing what, who's responsible for what decisions everyone gets to make, there's really not a lot of room for error there. I mean, room for conflict. I mean, there could be conflict, but at least you have a mechanism by which to resolve all of those conflicts. And often we'll do a lot of repeat business with the partners that we have. So
you've done three deals that are public with Vanka.
Correct.
3 or 4 deals with Adam America.
Adam America, we've probably done north of 10 deals together. And Vanki, we've done a bunch of business together. AEW, we've done a bunch of business together. And a lot of our partners, once you get into a relationship with them, you get real comfort level, you get a trust level, and you just go back and do repeat business.
What's your model when you go out there are you looking to raise a fund? How do you kind of finance your deals? How do you put them together? I know you said you're not very heavily leveraged, and that's something you want to keep going, it sounds like. But how do you put the money together? Are you raising funds from institutions? Are you raising money from sort of foreign capital? Where's that money coming from?
I mean, I think we have a bunch of different pockets of money depending on the transactions. Because again, I think we're one of the unique companies that does a lot of different size transactions and existing, ground up, some retail. So I think it depends on the specific deal. But yes, we have high net worth individuals who invest with us. We have family offices that are overseas as well as local that invest with us, and then we have institutional partners, who invest with us as well. So it really depends on the transaction, the size of the transaction, and the mix of the transaction.
Are you competing now with foreign capital for deals? Because I've seen that, that we had this Aussie townhouse company or Aussie REIT called Dixon that came up and bought a bunch of Brooklyn townhouses, and this was 3 years ago, but then they haven't really done very much in a while. But then you have other people coming in, then you have people like Blackstone looking at Brooklyn. Are you competing right now? Are you finding yourselves getting, pushed out of deals by foreign money, which may have different priorities than in New York?
I don't think it's the foreign money. I think it's the local New York developers that we're competing against, and again, some of them may be partnering with foreign money. Yeah. But typically it's the developers, guys similar to us that we're competing against.
How is that possible? I mean, there's deals that you guys are looking at, like River Tower, for example. That's sort of an institutional level deal.
That one I think is probably the one that would be, look, a lot of the foreign capital wants only something that's huge and that's sort of like a very, very known, they're the least risky money, right? So they want something that's there. They don't usually like to do ground up development. They, so I'd say that's probably the one that, that we saw it more. And I think that there was a foreign group that tried to buy it first.
What's sort of giving you pause when you guys are planning for the next 5 years, the next 10 years?
I think there's just a little bit of unknown about sort of how rent stabilization is going to work in the long run with growth of rent stabilization. And we're talking about the taxes before. I mean, the taxes continue to go up, but you're not really able to increase your rent stabilized, apartments. I think that's a little bit of an issue, and I think that's something that needs to be resolved. And I think just having clarity about how to work within sort of each one of these agencies and understanding sort of what's allowed and what's not allowed. I think if you're given the rules and you understand clearly how you can play the game, everyone will adjust and play the game correctly. So I think you're just getting a very clear roadmap as to exactly how we're able to build, what are going to be the tax, what exactly are the taxes, what is the growth going to be allowed. I think once you have all of that, you're able to make smarter decisions.
But there is such a strong negative stigma attached to anything to do with rent stabilization. So if you go there, and even if you have a reasonable rollout plan, in 10 years we're going to turn these units over, you're still going to get a lot of heat, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of turning them over. I think it's just a matter of understanding how you can grow the rents, right? I mean, and again, like David said earlier, our business isn't about rent stabilization or moving tenants out. That's not really what we do. We're very heavily focused on free market or ground up development, where that's not really an impactful part of our business model in general. But just understanding, even on the new buildings that we build, how do we grow rents? Is it going to be zero growth for the next 10 years? Or are we going to be able to grow stabilized rents by 3-5%, and we can at least sort of underwrite that and sort of properly prepare for it?
I always ask everyone this, your favorite deal that you guys did personally, and a deal that you would have loved to do that someone else has done.
The deal that I think I love the most was 65 North 6th Street. We built that building, prime Williamsburg. In 2011, we got the deal. People said, "You're crazy, you're going to build a new rental building in Williamsburg in 2011. There's like 5,000 empty units."
Right.
So people thought we were absolutely crazy. And what I've learned is when people don't think you're crazy, that's when you need to be worried. When everybody tells you how smart you are, that's when you have to worry. But we saw that the market was absorbing. We were able to get the deal. It was a stalled site. The owner couldn't get financing. So that's probably my favorite. The deal that
just in terms of rents, what were you guys able to achieve on that?
We thought we were going to get 45, and we got 65 a foot.
Wow. Yeah. So 65 a foot.
So that was a grand slam home run, and it turned out to be a great deal. And really, at the time, was something that people thought we were insane, that we were doing a ground up rental at that point in Williamsburg.
And which is the one you were kind of sitting in the bleachers and you're like, damn, I wish I had that one.
That I think it's 316 Bergen just kills me. That I think it was, I think Naftali ended up doing with AEW. It was in Borum Hill, and I wanted it really badly, and we couldn't move quickly enough. It turned out to be a great deal for them, and they did great. But it's on Bergen and Borum Hill over there. Great location. It just kills me. I almost can't drive down that block anymore because that it just, for some reason, that one sticks out as a deal that I really wish I had done.
I think there are actually two deals that I loved and that I think about all the time. And the first one is always the first deal that you do, right? So I think that we bought this small little building down on Suffolk Street that was 20 studio apartments, and it was the first deal we ever did. And it was simple in hindsight, but at the time it was the most complicated thing that we ever did. And it was just
in life,
right? It was like we had to raise $900,000, and it was like the most complicated thing we ever had to do. And we were super focused on it, and like it sort of was a jumping board for everything that we did. I also really liked the building we bought on the corner of 28th and 2nd, which is the Grayson, which was the first larger deal that we sort of did together.
How much did you guys pay for that?
We paid like $50 million for it. We invested another 15 to 20 into it. And it was a 28-story elevated building that we went through a very significant reposition, not that dissimilar to River Tower, which is now known as Oriana.
Did you guys sell that then?
Yeah, we sold it, about 18 months after we bought it, 2 years after we bought it.
For
$100 million.
Okay, so it worked out.
So it worked out okay for us.
And what's the one that's the sort of the damned?
I mean, there's so many that got away from us. But the one that I remember the most is there was a building on 350 Broadway, down in like Tribeca-ish.
Sure.
That we went through a very complicated negotiation.
Is that next to the People's the site, the landmark?
I think
346 is that site. I think it's probably right.
Yeah, I think it's just north of it.
Yeah.
So it was one that got away from us, and we were right there at the table, and it just didn't work out. And I think we were buying the building vacant for like $400 a foot, and in today's market,
I'd say any deal in 2011 or 12 that we didn't do is one that we regret.
Every one of them.